Wait just a second. Now I'm going to share. Um, Now it's sharing. Now I think you could press it in.
Yeah, I can put it in.
Yeah. Okay, I hope you're all seeing Kamala and Zelensky.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Yeah. So, my main international foreign affairs issue is Ukraine, and Kamala's all in. She's met with Zelensky 6 times. She's spoken out against the MAGA people that are playing games, and oh boy, Aiko just dropped her computer. So she may even be more hawkish than Biden. The speculation is things are in Kursk are still. We're trying to adjust to the discombobulation of the. So you've got that up. All right.
Well, while you're doing that
What
adjustment,
happened?
while you're doing that adjustment, do you think the Republicans' Congress's reluctance to support Ukraine could be a campaign issue?
Let's hope so. The way things are turning now, with Ukraine being very gallant, let's hope so. It sure took them a long time to get off the dime, even as Ukraine was giving ground. Let's hope. And then also, I even hope immigration will be an issue. We'll get to that in just a second. So she's basically a liberal internationalist, like me. I don't know about everybody else, and has been a strong advocate. I talked last week about how this election is turning into an election of vibes. Trump turned 2016 into an election of vibes, but let's hope Kamala's doing the same. And there's been other conservatives that are jumping on board. One of my favorites is David French, who writes for the New York Times, a big basketball fan, by the way. And he has frankly come out for Kamala. He said he'd voted for a third party 4 years ago, but the Republicans, after he did that, the Republicans staged January 6th, and he's a former soldier, and a veteran, very much opposed to the games that MAGA is playing with Ukraine. So he's voting for Kamala, front up. His good buddy and also a favorite conservative of mine, Jonah Goldberg, is similarly inclined in seeing this as a vibe election. But going even further, here is the mayor of Mesa, Arizona, who introduced Harrison Walz and called on his fellow Republicans to walk away from their party that's been taken over by extremists, particularly in Arizona, where they've been bad-mouthing John McCain of all things. So there's that. I'm just keeping a list of Kamala's campaign issues. If anybody wants to add anything, we talked about a number of these last week. I'm going to add a couple today. This accountability and truancy. It's an interesting issue. But the social media stuff, I never really drilled down into that. This is the British pop star, Charlie XCX. And she is fascinated with Kamala and has been touting her in social media, and it's taken off and it's been reciprocated. And so I don't understand it, but some of you may, but it's working, and that's great. The other interesting connection is this British rock star. Her mother is South Asian from Gujarat by way of Uganda, where a lot of Indians in Great Britain came from. And so the South Asians went to various African countries and became the shopkeepers, and which is why how Gandhi got to South Africa. It's the same phenomenon. And so there's that interesting connection. And then this is just more details above my pay grade. And she's taken off because of her collaboration with Kamala. There's been a symbiosis there. And so Kamala's getting a lot more hits. She's just as known for her dancing and cooking as her politics, which is part of social media, I guess. So not my cup of tea, but boy, whatever works.
John,
So,
hand
yes,
up. You say she's the biggest pop star, more than Taylor Swift? Really?
no, Taylor Swift's the biggest, I think.
Oh, okay. And on that point, Trump has run an AI video of Taylor Swift supporting him, which I wonder whether that might prompt her to actually, the real Taylor Swift, to come out openly supporting Harris.
Well, she came out explicitly for Biden at the last election. And her boyfriend, who is the tight end for the Chiefs,
Right.
um, he got involved in our bailiwick in vaccinations. He became a spokesman for which one? Oh, yeah, Pfizer. He became a spokesman for Pfizer and got embroiled in all that anti-vax craziness. So this power couple is very much leaning Democrat, and let's see how explicit it actually becomes.
Hey, John, my favorite new one is Dementia Dawn.
Oh, on the dementia point.
Dementia Dawn.
I would put age and dementia. I mean, the Republicans made such a big deal about dementia. I think it should be rammed back. Excuse me. I think it should be gently served back to them. But Dementia Dawn.
On the dementia score, something I wrote to Andy Borowitz, I got a few likes on it, is that every time he gets Kamala's name wrong, point out that when people start forgetting the names of people they know well, it's a sure sign of dementia. So every time he says Kamala, there it is. That's him, demented, taking over.
Well, I'm a retired neurologist, and I think he has frontotemporal dementia or one of those forms. I mean, really. And I predict in 2 years, he's probably going to be declared incompetent. And if he were to get elected, J.D. Vance would be sworn in using the 25th Amendment. I'm positive. I think the guy is really losing it. And I seriously think he's demented.
Okay, it sounds like we've got a consensus here. So good. Um, all
Oops.
right.
This is Carol, but I have a question.
Yeah.
So could it be like Reagan? And so instead of it going to JD Vance, they'll just hide it and Melania will take over?
That's entirely possible. Yes. I think they'll hide it as long as they can. Uh, and Trump is so outlandish. Everybody says, no, that's just him, but he is saying things that are inappropriate. There's a podcast called Shrinking Trump. I don't know if anybody's heard of this, where psychologists have been analyzing his speech patterns and so on, and the way he writes things. And they are similarly convinced.
Huh. All right. Yeah. Okay. This is promising. Okay, just another theme that we've talked about, which is this cross-party cooperation. We've seen it already with prison reform, and Kamala and Rand Paul were a big part of that, as was Cory Booker. Um, Also, regulating big tech. There's a coalition now. And even J.D. Vance is in favor of increased regulation, along with this very activist regulator. Khan is her name. And there's an interesting cooperation between far left and far right against big tech. And I've mentioned before, and I'm going to mention it again, immigration. You had this cooperation with Sinema and James Lankford. And that they had a bill in February. And Trump said, don't vote for it. And we've talked about it. I think this can be used against Trump. Hey, we had a compromise and you nixed it. And it's a big loss for Republicans because the Democrats were more desperate for a bill than they were. So this deal is heavily weighted towards Republicans. Um, but when Trump said no, everybody abandoned Lankford. Sinema went on and gave a speech telling the Republicans they were all talk and no action. And Since then, since I first talked about it, there's been further feedback. The senator from Indiana thinks that this was done for campaign purposes. He's mad. McConnell, even Tim Tillis from North Carolina, and of course Lisa Murkowski. This is about our country. This is about democracy around the world. She sees it as a bigger deal. So I think Kamala's talked about bringing this bill up right away if she is elected. And so I think she's going to make it a big part of the campaign, and it'll be interesting. So the I've read this book. I just finished it last night. This is her closest thing to an autobiography. It was written in 2019 in preparation for her 2020 run, which didn't go anywhere. Um, uh, she mentions Lankford in the book as being someone that she could work with. So it's interesting after having read about Lankford's effort in immigration that I should run across her talking about him in the book, and him coming across and saying, I should have a family that looks like you over to my house to entertain. Now, I don't know if that happened. She didn't say. But he indicated that a place to start would be to get to know each other socially. And so they worked together. They were fortuitously both on Homeland Security and the intelligence committees. And they worked together to get a Secure Elections Act passed. And this was a compromise. So and this is the committee, the Intelligence Committee, and notice who the alpha dog is here, speaking to the press, Kamala. So that's interesting, right? She's got some chops, um, with her fellow Senate colleagues, and let's hope that holds her in good stead as she's president. By the way, the New York Times they do a weekly interview podcast, and on August 16th, it was with this guy Langford, and he is very religious. He was a minister before he got into politics, and he presented his point of view quite cogently. Shigeko, in particular, I think you would appreciate this interview. It's called The Interview, and you could run it down. If you can't find it, I'll find it for you.
Yeah, and Warnick was very good in his speech last night. I was very impressed. He said that Trump should read the Bible.
Oh,
I agree
good.
with Shigeko. Warnock was incredible.
Okay. All right. I was too panicked last night trying to finish my book in time for today. All right. We've mentioned Heather Cox Richardson, and she's suggesting that Biden has contributed to a turning point. The week I couldn't get anything to show, I went over this, but now I'm going to do it with the visual, so some of it may sound familiar, and I may be repeating myself, and I apologize. But she noticed how quickly things have changed. That we've been thinking ever since these two old guys were running that this couldn't go on much longer. But it did, and it went on and it went on, and then suddenly everything changed. And Hemingway said it's like bankruptcy that way. It goes on and on and on, and then suddenly you're bankrupt. Political change happens in quantum leaps, it turns out. And you may recall, she thinks we may be at a fourth turning. So, what was the first turning? The first turning was after the French and Indian War in 1763, when we were all British colonists, and the British Empire had just defeated the French, and we were all feeling very grateful for that. And the French weren't around, but then the British said, the French aren't going to be there anymore, but the Indians are, and we're just going to let them have everything west of the crest of the Appalachians, so you can't go across. And some people who had land titles to a lot of land, like George Washington, were very unhappy. He had been paid as a surveyor in land, and he'd been paid as a British colonel in land. So there was some unhappiness, but it really the taxes started rolling, and then there was the Boston Tea Party. So that was the first big turning. The second was Richardson thinks was the Civil War, and that in 1853 the South had everything in Washington locked down: the Senate, the White House, the Supreme Court. And they planned to expand slavery throughout the New World and maybe even back into the Old World. But Lincoln turned that around. The third big turning was the 1920s, and we were familiar with a play called "It Can't Happen Here," which was a little bit about the attitude in the 20s, and there was some even in this country some inching in the direction of authoritarianism, even fascism. So some leftists were talking about how they were being suppressed on the street by thugs, and that we might be going down the same path as Italy and Germany and Spain. But then along came FDR. In this same vein, before FDR, the year FDR got nominated, there was this movie called Gabriel Over the White House. And it starred Walter Houston, John Houston's father. You may know him from the Treasure of the Sierra Madres. He's co-starred with Humphrey Bogart. But he plays this president who has some kind of stroke, and his body is taken over by Archangel Gabriel. And so Gabriel over the White House, Gabriel comes in and solves all of America's problems in the simple way that an authoritarian would, which was firing squads of gangsters without trial. It's quite sobering to watch this and to learn that it was financed by William Randolph Hearst, who no doubt fancied himself as Gabriel, coming in and solving all of America's considerable problems, especially after the Depression started. But FDR preempted Gabriel and William Randolph Hearst. The thing that really triggered it, of course, was the awakening was the Great Crash. Hey, this is terrible. Something needs to be done. This was like the Stamp Act or the Civil War, Kansas, Nebraska Act, and then came the Great Crash, which Richardson considers starting the third turning point that led to FDR. And he fought back on inequality, and we know whether it was from the war itself or from the very high taxes that are associated with World War II, that inequality was straightened out. And now we're maybe at the fourth turning. What was for David French? It was January 6th when this guy tried to take over the government against the Constitution. And then Richardson says, and then from that moment, we started doing the heavy work. And she quotes de Tocqueville that says, Americans are forever forming associations and doing 1,000 different clubs and looking for any a way of attacking problems. It's really our fourth part of government, our civic society. So, in addition to executive, legislative, and judicial, we have a civic society that does a lot of the heavy lifting. And we saw that as soon as Trump got elected. Was the Women's March. And I'll just give you a preemptive segue that this was when Kamala came to Washington. This was when she was elected to the Senate. And we noticed Abe Lincoln showed up in the crowd. That was good of him to come. The other thing that puts a sharp point on it is January 6th wasn't enough. He's back, and he's back with a Christian nationalist who is young enough that could carry this movement, whatever it is, Christian nationalism into the future. And the common thing is they want power, and they're going for it. But again, the civic society is coming alive, and that's what Richardson noticed. Yes, Shigeko.
I heard on a webinar Kit Singer, and he said that Trump is very unhappy with J.D. Vance. I don't know if that's true or not, but I was really surprised to hear that from him. He was on the webinar for Jews for Democracy and Justice.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, no, it is. And I mean, he wasn't vetted. He was simply selected by Don Jr. and Tucker Carlson. They thought they liked the cut of his jib. And he lost. I mean, he was elected senator from Ohio, but by a much smaller margin than their popular governor was. So he's not going to do well in swing areas. That's for sure. And anyway, so these are the words of Heather Cox Richardson. And then Kamala became vice president, had some shaky moments, but the Dobbs judgment that took away the federal right to an abortion changed things, and it created a lane for Kamala to resuscitate her fortunes. And she was it fits one of her themes, which is freedom. This basically took away the freedom of women across the country for a certain right, whether it's morally correct or not is a separate question. But taking away rights turns out to not be very popular. And so this is what Richardson says is what's at stake now. And I don't think this is overstatement, this list of hers. I'll pause a second and let you take that in. And so she challenges us to follow in the footsteps of Americans at their most noble moments and try to turn America away from a very dangerous direction. And Biden, this is his 24 hours. Last night was his his night, and he's been getting a lot of praise. This is a slide from Ramsey that's just showing how billionaires get away with sequestering their unrealized capital gains. And this is a way that that money can be smoked out and taxed. Because those people that make all that money are making it on the backs of American infrastructure, and they need to contribute to American infrastructure, and that's what we're after. In addition, you'll remember Fareed has been summing up Biden's accomplishments, and he goes to so far as to say that Biden has overturned the neoliberalism of the previous 40 years. That not since Reagan have we had somebody that has put government on the track to help ordinary Americans. That's pretty high praise. And Reagan slashed a lot of government regulation and safety systems, and they've been slowly but surely reintroduced. The Supreme Court's making it harder now. They surely are, with something called Chevron deference. We won't get into that, but it's going to be harder. And so Biden wants to help parents, and particularly he helped them with the child tax credit during COVID. The Republicans have stopped it from being renewed. So if Democrats get power, that'll come back, and it'll help build a stronger middle class. So I think Fareed Zakaria invites us to think in terms of Piketty, and that since Biden's come in, a lot of accomplishments have been rendered to undo inequality. And so that's just saying pretty much the same thing. So infrastructure, a lot of money going now into these investments that I've mentioned already. Energy being a big one. We talked about that when we did the solar revolution. And green energy, 56,000 projects have been launched in transportation and infrastructure. Jim.
Yeah, you mentioned the child tax credit being extended if Harris is elected. And it's not that simple, I don't believe. Doesn't the Congress have to approve that?
Oh, yeah.
And
what I should have said more precisely, if Harris gets elected Obama got elected,
well,
the Senate and the Congress.
The second part of that is much more challenging because the Democrats are in trouble in the Senate, especially with the filibuster, but even maintaining a majority is not likely to happen.
Well, it's not likely to happen as of the last polls. You don't know. I mean, there was a surge with Obama. Who knows?
No, I don't know, and you don't know.
I'm optimistic that we would have. There's a possibility that
I would comment that Democratic senators from Montana and Ohio are not at the convention because they are being challenged. And if you can't even maintain the senators you have, and you might lose a couple others along the way, it looks pretty daunting.
Yeah.
Jackie
But
Wilson isn't
It
there
looked
either.
pretty. It looked pretty daunting when it looked like there was before Trump sabotaged the two special Georgia Senate races. It looked daunting then. And then you got both of those, and you get a tie with Kamala casting the difference. And it was very daunting. And Joe Manchin wouldn't do anything until he did. And then he finally did, and he signed on to the so-called uh, uh, what was it? Inflation Reduction Act, which it wasn't that at all. It was a Green New Deal. And so, and in the last possible minute, he voted for all this infrastructure stuff. And so, yeah, it probably won't come in as easily as I'm dreaming it will, but it might work that way.
My comment is that Harris is proposing all these economic things, but it relies a great deal on what the composition of Congress is, and it's not a fait accompli.
I agree with you. Not a fait accompli.
Ocasio-Cortez, she said, get the Democrats in last night.
All right. We shall see. And just another word on the child tax credit. It reduced child poverty by 46%. So this is why we have to win Congress. And 45 million jobs produced, most ever, unemployment low, black labor force participation. This is all just by way of giving Biden his due. The poor guy, I'm sure is feeling a little deprived, but he's accomplished quite a bit. And this is pretty much just restating what I've already stated, the CHIPS and Science Act. I'll just emphasize that. And the government stopping, reducing monopolistic, and so better than any other developed country, that's for sure. So I just wanted to take that moment and review the nice things that had been said about Biden, particularly by Fareed. Yeah, Aiko.
The thing is that they really did give Biden his due last night, because they mentioned that he came in during COVID, so he didn't have much of a what do you call it, campaign and all of that. And so, I mean, the posters and stuff that were up, it was wonderful. They praised him and thanked him, and he really got his due. And I wonder if Trump feels like he's running against Joe Biden's legacy and Kamala Harris now.
I hope so. It couldn't happen to a nicer guy. All right, so this is the book I finished last night, 2019 Autobiography. And I've talked a little bit about her parents. They were on the Berkeley campus when Aiko and I were. They were married in 1963. They had Kamala in 1964 in Oakland. And then they were graduate students, so they kind of had to go where there were positions. So they roamed around a little bit looking for, and their marriage did not survive. They separated when Kamala was 7. And we talked a little bit about Donald Harris, the father. He settled at Stanford, and they, I think, mislabeled him a combative Marxist. The Economist did, but he was mainstream enough to become an advisor to Jamaica, and is retired, still in Stanford, I think. The mother was a research PhD in breast cancer, and she stayed on and studied nutrition and endocrinology at Berkeley, got her PhD there also in 1964. Um, Kamala has a younger sister, Maya. Um, she took a different route. She went to Berkeley and Stanford. You'll see. Kamala decided to go to the historically Black Institute College, Howard, and for ideological reasons. And she's very much active. She'd work for Hillary Clinton. She works for liberal think tanks like the Center for the American Progress. And I think she was um, Kamala's campaign manager in 2020, and then that may have been the problem. Um, so anyway, just to go further back, this is Don Harris's father, who's not Black at all, who is Hispanic. So Kamala has one Hispanic um, grandparent, one Black grandparent, and two South Asian grandparents. Um, and this is the paternal grandmother, the mother in Jamaica. The This is Kamala visiting her maternal grandfather, who was an Indian diplomat in Zambia. And she respects him for his politics. He's a very progressive thinker. Um, this is, and this we may have passed this home in our wanderings around Berkeley on Bancroft Way. This is west of Martin Luther King, the Berkeley High School, I should say, and your standard duplex, and they lived on the second floor, the first floor that was conveniently a nursery where the girls were brought up. Now, if Kamala wins, this house will get a plaque, no doubt. And this is Bancroft Way, south of, west of the high school. And so Kamala, as she pointed out in the debate with Biden, said she was bused. And this is actually her class to which she was bused. So she was bused out of the Black part of Berkeley, Oakland, and integrated into a white second grade. This is the girls. Kamala says this was her first afro. Trump has made a big deal. How was she raised? Did she identify Black? And the answer is she did identify Black. The book is quite clear that the mother realized that because of their appearance, they would be treated as black in America. If they had been in Brazil, they wouldn't have been treated black. But in America, with our warped sense of race, they would be. So she was educated to black heroes like Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth. She's only a quarter black.
Yeah.
She's only a quarter black. You're right. And so culturally, they sang in the choir at an African American church, and they frequented African American cultural centers. That nursery school down below had on the walls a lot of pictures of African American heroes and heroines. So, but also bicultural. So the mother sang in a Hindu choir, went to a Hindu temple, and her parents came from and visited from India, from Chennai, and the girls spent the summers with their dad in Palo Alto, where a number of us spent some summers. Good dancer. They were trained, and so her the fondness of social media for her dancing has a background behind it. And Kamala was socially confident all the way. One of her classmates who was bused and was a little bit more reticent about being bused commented how easy it was for Kamala. She never, she belongs in every room wherever she pops up. She is not intimidated at all. And I think we've seen some of that. The mother goes to Canada, and so the girls go to high school in Canada. But among Kamala's heroes at the time is Thurgood Marshall, and for that reason, she wants to go where he went. She wants to go to Howard, the historically black college. So that's where she winds up, and says she went to every protest against apartheid that there was. This is her visiting her grandmother in later years in Jamaica. And this is her graduating from Hastings. All these photos are in the back of the book uh, that I finished last night. So she graduates from Hastings and then returns to her hometown, Oakland, into the office of the district attorney. And she has to explain why she wants to be a prosecutor to her family. They don't get it because at that time, the man, the DA, the public prosecutors were perceived as being anti-black. But she had a different idea. Now, she spends a decade in Oakland, district attorney's office, and then she eventually switches over to San Francisco. We'll learn a little bit later that socially, she gets plugged into the upper echelons of society, no doubt because of her personality and the fluidity of her social skills. So she gets plugged in to Pacific Heights in San Francisco as well. And so she moves pretty effortlessly, first to the district attorney's office, but then the city attorney recognizes her talent and moves her up. And it's from the office of city attorney that she decides to run for the district attorney of San Francisco. And then just quickly go through that. She gets to be Attorney General in 2010, reelected in 2014, and then runs for Barbara Boxer's seat in the Senate in 2016, defeating Loretta Sanchez. But just going back a little bit, that's the grand arch. Yes, Homer.
Well, I just want to know if there's any mention of Willie Brown in this autobiography in her San Francisco years.
Yes, I'm getting to that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So now I'm going back to the 1980s when she becomes a sort of a pioneer in prosecutors who are usually perceived as not being friends of the African American community, but she said it's the wrong way of thinking about it. African Americans, they want safety. They see, and she sees safety as a civil right. She would never in her right mind say defund the police, although I'm sure that during the George Floyd riots at one point, she did pick up a sign, and the Republicans will plaster it all over the nation. But she's never behaved like that as a prosecutor. And her idea was that blacks should be on the inside of the prosecutor's office and should be running it from the inside out. So that's one thing. And so next, so I mentioned all of a sudden she's a socialite, but she also decides when she decides to run for district attorney, she takes an ironing board to parking lots around the in front of grocery stores in the Bay Area and starts handing out literature. And she cobbles together an unlikely coalition of Pacific Heights, Hunters Point, the African American community, and the Castro. And she's very assiduous, writes a lot of thank you notes. She lives in Soma, and is a social butterfly from there. And this is where we get to the point about Willie Brown. In the 1990s, when she was still a district attorney in Oakland, I said she had been flitting around in high society in San Francisco, and it didn't take long for Willie Brown to recognize how special she was. Willie Brown had done favors for Pelosi and Dianne Feinstein as well, had put them on commissions like he did for Kamala. But Kamala, he took Kamala a step further, as Homer points out. Willie Brown was married but separated, and of course Kamala was unattached totally. So she recognized that Terrence Hallinan was not running the DA's office very, very efficiently. So Homer will know the Hallinan family goes back to the 1950s. And they apparently had become corrupt. This Hallinan himself was nicknamed K.O. Hallinan because of his propensity to get into fights, fisticuffs. So they're having their first debate, and Terence Hallinan decides this is the time to bring up Willie Brown. And that if Kamala wins, Willie Brown will have a mole inside the DA's office. And this, I think, is a plant from the audience who asks a tough question, but she's ready. And when he went low, she responded, well, what I'll do if I'm elected, I'm going to set up a public integrity desk, and they're going to investigate any public official that goes to houses of prostitution, or any public official that is a deadbeat dad. And apparently both Hallinan and there was another guy that was in the mix. Those were a part of the problems and their baggage. And so she said, of course, I would never bring up going to houses of ill repute or deadbeat dads. And that caused the audience to laugh, and she won them over to her side with this disingenuous quip. So she was ready, and she survived, and she won. And that was 2003. Later examples of being able to use her elbows in politics. She went after Biden. He once said, I can get along with people across the aisle, even segregationists. And she went after him for that. And then she referred to Donald Trump as a really small dude behind a curtain like the Wizard of Oz. Well, that's pretty good. So that's what's waiting. So she's got a family advisor crew. This is her brother-in-law, Tony West, who's married to Maya. And he is first line advisor for her. And by the way, he was the one that lined up everybody so quickly when Biden dropped out. He managed to make the phone calls, had it all set up, and everybody fell into line for Kamala. So Tony West, somebody you'll be hearing more about. So she becomes a high-profile progressive prosecutor. And how am I doing for time? Okay, I've got about 2 more minutes. I'll try to wind this up. So she wants to look at safety as well as the root causes of crime. And she wants to make sure that to reduce the recidivism. So she starts this, she's quite proud of it. She spends a lot of time on it in the book, Back on Track, which is set up for people coming out of prison, getting them plugged in for living and job advice. So she starts that in the Bay Area. When she becomes the state attorney general. It goes statewide and then national. So there's some version of this all across the nation to keep fellows coming out of jail, mostly fellas, from going back to jail. As a corollary to that, she decided to tackle truancy because she'd seen statistics that showed that truancy was a predictor for getting convicted and going to jail. And so she made it part of her prosecutor's job to start meeting um, also attending the teachers and parents meetings if a kid's having problems. It was kind of experimental and a far out thing to do, but to have a third person in the room just kind of emphasizing how important it is for this kid to get plugged into school and what the teachers and the parents could do. And she wanted to make the parents accountable to the extent that if the kids didn't go to school, the parents could be criminally charged. That was never done in San Francisco, but there's some parts of the state where that was done. And then, of course, any good thing has a downside. So this was taken on by a different breed of progressive prosecutors, as saying this is blaming the victim, this is punitive, this is negative stereotyping, whereas Kamala saw it as tough love. And so the challenge, and she struggled with it and still is, making accountability empathetic. That's the challenge. But she took this on. God bless her. Unfortunately, when she won the Senate seat, she defeated Loretta Sanchez in 2016. She comes into Washington, D.C. at the same time Trump does, and many people see her as an antidote to Trump, and that pushes her faster than she's ready to go. And when she comes in, she's not for tearing the system down. But she does immediately get high profiles in judicial hearings. And this is where I think I'll stop. A good place to start with Kamala as a senator, and we'll continue. But for me, the most interesting part of biographies are what we've already covered, the early years, and you're as familiar with this as I am at this point. So I'll stop talking and let you all talk if you have anything to say. Shigeko.
I just wanted to say, did anyone hear that Lindsey Graham said that Trump cannot win?
Oh, really?
Good.
Yeah, I was really surprised to hear that
Good.
from him.
The
Well,
rat's deserting the
Mesa-
sinking ship.
Yeah,
What?
go ahead, Michael.
Well, no, I just said it's the old saying, the rat's deserting the sinking ship.
Let's hope.
My question, if I may, is anybody, I had the video on. Is anybody familiar with anything about her law school? How she did in law school, what professors she worked with, and what they said about her? Is there anything coming out of that? She was here, and I mean, she went to Hastings, so I'm just wondering.
Oh,
Or did
I
she
read
bring it up?
I read somewhere she failed the bar once, but she did pass it the second time.
Yeah,
Oh, really?
that's in the book. She was devastated by that.
Well, nothing new for a lot of people who take the bar,
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, absolutely.
but nothing in terms of teachers who she worked with and so on. She doesn't comment on that at all.
No, she was not an academic as much. I think her mentors were more uh, uh, prosecutors in Alameda County that she bonded with, not academic.
Maybe Lindsey Graham's remark is an example of what Hemingway was talking about. Little by little, then all of a sudden. I think that's possible. I think as Bernie Sanders has predicted, he just will come apart abruptly as well. I think the cracks are appearing.
Well,
Yeah.
he made that awful statement about the Medal of Honor going to
Oh,
people
yeah.
who are dead and injured.
Full of bullets or dead.
I know.
That's worse than being a sucker or a loser.
Oh, and he also said something about he's better looking than Kamala.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean by he's demented. You know.
Well, what he said about McCain is, I like my soldiers that don't get captured.
That's right.
Okay, folks.
All righty.
Thank
See
you, John.
next week.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Good one.
Thank you.
That was interesting.
Bye, John.
Did you stop the thing?
I'm trying.